G'day trendsetters, I'm John with Gravel Cyclist. I'm coming to you today with a video about two of the wildest and craziest bikes in all of gravel cycling. On my left is the Cannondale Topstone Lefty Carbon. On my right is the Niner MCR 9 RDO. The Niner MCR 9 RDO was developed over the space of many years, whereas the Topstone Lefty Carbon, this fork has been in development for a long time, and the Kingpin was released sometime last year when they launched the Topstone, but this as an overall package snuck onto the gravel scene late May of 2020. One thing is for certain, these bikes are not drop bar mountain bikes, and it's not a case of taking your mountain bike and putting a drop bar on it, as a lot of the haters would suggest. Both of these bikes were designed from the ground up to be drop bar specific bikes of the gravel kind. They both feature appropriate top tube lengths, geometry, and so on. Bear in mind, this is not a review. I'm going to use this opportunity to show you the key features and the differences between each of these bikes. I'm not going to cover the drivetrains, although they are similar. They both feature Shimano GRX 2x on the Niner MCR and 1x on the Cannondale Topstone Carbon Lefty. With that said, I've got a very comprehensive review online now of the Niner MCR 9 RDO. You can see that linked in the description below, and this bike I'm working on reviewing at the time of this video. But I have written enough to formulate some early opinions that will play well in this comparison between the two bikes, but without giving too much away. That's what the review is all about. The Niner is available in just 3 sizes, and I think they've missed the boat in regards to the market for riders of smaller stature, regardless of their gender. My good friend Amanda Panda Nauman would love to ride this bike. I realise that's a fiscal decision because making moulds is very expensive. The Topstone, on the other hand, is available in 5 sizes, and there's also a women's specific version which comes in 3 sizes. So this bike should have just about everybody covered. On to weights. With the stock Stance Grail wheels that come on the Niner, right now it's not fitted with those wheels, you're looking at around about 25.5 pounds in the size small frame, which is a 54.5 top tube. The Cannondale with its stock WTB wheels in 650B weighs around 23.5 pounds, a distinct difference of around 2 pounds between both of these bikes. 2 things to add here. The Niner overall feels very balanced. If you pick it up, the weight feels very even in your hands. The Cannondale, on the other hand, if you pick that up, it feels very front end heavy. So this shock, I have no idea what the weight is versus the weight of the Fox AX, but don't forget that's because the suspension at the rear end is likely a lot lighter than what's on the Niner MCR. Let's start off at the front end of the Niner. The suspension comes courtesy of the Fox AX suspension fork, AX standing for Adventure. It's a traditional looking fork that has 40mm of travel. It's actually a modified mountain bike fork, but obviously they've lessened the travel. The fork is configured for a rider's body weight by setting the air pressure, ideally before you ride it. The fork can be set to fully rigid or fully open or somewhere in between, courtesy of the dial atop the fork. The fork supports 650B or 700C and has quite good clearance, although 700C by 50mm will be a tight fit on the front end. This is a fork that rides very well in the seated position, but when you find yourself out of the saddle with the fork open, you will notice a distinctive bobbing sensation. The fork will also compress under hard braking, but again, it's the sort of sensation you would expect from a suspension fork of this nature, so there's nothing negative really there. Overall, the fork does a fantastic job of smoothing out a lot of the smaller road bars and potholes that you'll find along your local and not so local gravel roads. However, like most suspension designs, this suspension does not mitigate washboard or corrugations if you prefer completely, because no suspension in my experience can rebound fast enough to deal with such a rapid change in the road surface. It's not a flaw of the suspension design, it's just physics. In my experience, only bigger tires and lower pressure can help deal with washboard road surfaces. The fork is compatible with most wheels provided you have end caps available for 15mm. If your wheel set is 12mm, you'll need to use an adapter kit by JJBP, which I've linked in the description below. That kit will basically reduce the fork to accept 12mm wheels. Very nifty. The fork features a post mounting for the front brake, but it plays well with both rotor types, 6-bolt or center lock. Onto the rear end of the bike, and the Niner MCR 9 RDO features the company's CVA technology, which is constant varying arc, although they've tuned it for gravel so it's got less travel. The rear end has 50 millimeters of active travel. The system centers around the X-Fusion shock, which, like the front of the bike, you need to set for your appropriate body weight. There's also a complex set of linkages and bearings that make the whole system work. This system is fantastic for seated pedaling. I noticed no bobbing when I was riding along. It's very stable, very smooth. You have to remember, a system like this adds complexity to the bike, and along with that comes maintenance. So there's going to be maintenance for the rear end and maintenance on the shock as well. Like the shock on the front, you can completely lock out the rear end of the bike with a remote handlebar control. Another good positive about this bike is the rider's saddle height is not affected in any way by the suspension effect. As you can see, it's one seamless tube basically. That's a drawback, particularly with suspension seat posts where you're always moving around and affecting your saddle height, which can really irritate some riders. The rear end of the Niner supports flat mount brakes, and the rear axle is 142 by 12 millimeters. At the front of the Cannondale Topstone Carbon Lefty, stating the obvious, you have the very distinctive Lefty fork. It's a monofork, one side only, and it offers 13 millimeters of active suspension travel. The fork is optimized for 650B, but I understand that Cannondale has a kit that will allow you to use this fork with 700C wheels. The Lefty technology has been around for many years and it's well proven, but some folks just do not like how this bike looks. With that said, the fork has excellent tire and mud clearance, but as you can see, it's a proprietary design. Therefore, that's going to limit which wheels you can purchase for this bike. Now, there are third-party wheel sets and third-party hubs, such as those by DT Swiss, but again, something to think about. And additionally, not every bike shop is going to have spare parts for this fork when you invariably need service on the bike. So something else to consider. There's also a funky process that you must undergo in order to swap the front wheel. In a nutshell, you need to remove the front brake physically, pull the wheel off, put a wheel back on, put the brake back in place, then lock it down. And thankfully, Cannondale has revised how this system happens now with a nice little quick release system, so it's quite easy, but I understand the earlier Lefties were quite a painful experience. Like the Niner fork, the Lefty fork is really well suited to seated riding. It does a really nice job of mitigating smaller bumps and potholes, etc. But because it's only got 30 millimeters of travel, it's not going to take away some of the seriously big hits, but it does enough to take the edge off, that's for sure. And if you happen to ride this fork out of the saddle, it doesn't bob as noticeably as the Fox AX fork. I think that's mostly because it's less travel and there's only one leg. It feels honestly a little bit stiffer when I'm riding out of the saddle, so that could be another good quality that some people might like. Regarding the brake rotor interface, this uses the venerable 6-bolt system, but I think that's inherent to how the Lefty system works. And Cannondale did themselves well by speccing the WTB Venture tyre in 650B by 47 millimeters. I've reviewed this tyre, and you can see that linked in the description below. It's a wide casing, and if you inflate it to the appropriate pressure, you're going to have a nice smooth ride, suspended or not. To the rear of the Cannondale Topstone Carbon Lefty and the bike's Kingpin suspension design, there are virtually no moving parts in this system. It relies on a through-axle pivot point in the seat tube to provide flex around the stays, the seat tube, and also the back end of the top tube. So the whole system is designed to flex. Now, Cannondale claim you're getting up to 30 millimeters of suspension effect. I've ridden it enough to say I can't say if that part's true, but there is definitely a real suspension effect happening. It's not as active as the Niner or as plush as the Niner, but there is definitely some give in the rear end and some added comfort. Now, don't forget, I have not conducted a full review of this bike, so I'm going to relay my findings later on, but so far, they're looking pretty good. I haven't noticed any negatives with the change of my seat post position because, like I mentioned, this whole area is designed to flex. So particularly the back end of the saddle, I've noticed when I'm hitting bumps, the tail of the saddle is pushing down a little bit if you look between your legs at the seat post. So people who are kind of fussy about their position on the bike might notice that. Hasn't been a problem for me so far, but long term, maybe so. The rear end supports flat mount brakes and 12 millimeter by 140 millimeter through axles, so you can run most regular wheels, at least on the rear end of the Cannondale Topstone Lefty Carbon. Cannondale Topstone Carbon Lefty, you know what I mean. With all of this said, there's a lot of information to absorb here, and I'm not going to decide for you which bike is best for you. Both have suspension that works and is effective, but the Niner suspension is more active and does provide a better quality of overall ride comfort. Now, price might be a factor as well. Bear in mind the specs are similar, but there's enough differences to make the prices quite a bit different actually. The Cannondale with the level 3 Shimano GRX spec, you're looking at around about $3,700 US with 1x gearing. The Niner MCR 9 RDO, the 4-star build with Shimano GRX mechanical, 2x, you're looking at US $5,900, so it's quite a significant price increase over the Cannondale. So with all of that said, good luck with your decision. I hope this provided some perspective into helping you decide which one of these bikes might be right for you. Thank you for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the Gravel Cyclist YouTube channel and don't forget to click the bell button to be notified of future videos as they appear on the channel. I'll see you in the next video.